Hello and welcome to today's session. We're here to talk about VMs and to Kubernetes and how to overcome the data storage challenges. My name is Paul Nashawaty and I am the practice lead at the Future Room Group, and I cover the application development and modernization practice. And I'm joined today by Nivas from Dell. Nivas, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, nice to meet you, Paul. Hello, everyone. My name is Nivas Iyer. I'm the principal product manager here at Dell. I manage the Kubernetes storage initiatives here, and I'm really excited to be talking to you, Paul.
Yeah, same. This is an exciting time. I mean, cloud native applications and orchestration around Kubernetes is really popular and it's really growing. But there's a lot of challenges that go along with it as organizations are looking and balancing VM and Kubernetes requirements for these enterprise applications. They have to think about data storage challenges. So, Navas, when we look at the overall landscape and the architecture for 2024, how are organizations viewing old and new ways of application building and VMs and Kubernetes? What are they doing?
Yeah, so Paul, I have been on this in this industry for over 10 or 12 years now, and I've seen a rapid change from bare metal to VMs in the I would say the first the 2010 timeframe, where people looking for server consolidations and looking for software defined architectures, and VMware kind of helped in that era of the first age of cloud building, if you will. And the next age, if you will, was beyond that to app modernization. And that's where Kubernetes has come in as like a layer that provides a platform for a PaaS platform, as in a container basically you're slicing the operating system to make applications more easily consumable and more easily dynamic, and fitting in with a more agile transformation with DevOps practices. And so Kubernetes fits right well into the application architecture changes. And of course, VMware has led the change with the infrastructure changes, but we are also seeing some of those VMware components or the ideas coming flowing back into Kubernetes a little bit.
So that's great. But and I agree with you. I mean, we see 88% of production workloads running in VMs today. We also see that in our research, we see 94% of organizations running on two or more clouds. So this adoption across cloud ready and cloud native environments is really taking off, really exciting. And it's all about that modernization practice, right? And organizations that are driving towards this are really looking for kind of seamless ways to do this. But heritage applications or legacy environments have some strict requirements. When we look at those applications and the data that goes along with those applications, we've seen a rise in adoption in databases like Redis and MySQL and Postgres and Kubernetes environments. So that's a challenge for organizations. How is this changing the way enterprises are approaching stateful applications in their ecosystems?
So Kubernetes, it started out in now it is like ubiquitous across the board, and as I mean, for analytics to machine learning to Gen AI, all the way, and it's also finding its way back into transactional type applications and also on the systems of records and systems of engagement on the front end side, because it provides that agility, the modern flexibility to make sure that your applications are portable, and also and it's truly multi-cloud in a way that you want your applications to be available either on a particular cloud at one time, and you want to move that application to another cloud. Kubernetes provides that flexibility and availability to do that. So initially, when Kubernetes started, it was primarily focused on stateless application. That's why you had concepts of load balancing with replica sets, where you had stateless component that could be burst at very quickly with the services front end, and then you could But then later on, as they added a database or data or stateful application that needed to maintain state, you had to make changes to it. So Kubernetes introduced the concept of a stateful set, which basically provides a headless service, and then you can directly talk into the pods. And then now the resilience became a much important aspect as to how do I make sure that my components are more resilient in a stateful manner. And there are the other aspect with Kubernetes is how it consumes storage. And earlier, when Kubernetes introduced the concept of consuming storage, it had the concept of an inbox driver, or basically each storage vendor writes their own driver in the Kubernetes community. And then and then it became really unwieldy because there were so many different types of volume types, and the code base became unwieldy. So Kubernetes moved to a concept of an of an of a driver, of a CSI driver. Basically, it's an interface that every storage vendor would then implement, and then Kubernetes consumes that interface in a standardized fashion, and then consumes a storage in and attaches it to an application, and they create other dynamism with the concept of percent volume claims, percent volumes, where you have application can then define, hey, I need this much amount of storage, these are the kind of I need read write once, read write many, whatever, and then Kubernetes just does it for you in a very declarative fashion, and the applications are to a certain extent totally decoupled from the storage implementation, as 12-factor applications require.
Yeah. So what you're
Now, yeah. Mhm.
so what you're saying is it's a really super easy problem to solve, right? No.
It is well, you well, but there are gaps. There are gaps, and with the CSI driver, because the challenges are with resilience, and the challenges are with making like this things like disaster recovery. So with a lot of the customers that we deal with here at Dell, when they are looking at modernization, there are when you look at especially like transactional type applications where they are looking for, hey, I want this to be resilient to hardware failures, and so lot some of the CSI concepts are not there yet. So at Dell, we worked on, okay, how about we can try to create a set of modules or application that could fix these things. So these need to be fixed as to, okay, how can I make sure if there's a node has failed, how can I make sure that those stateful applications are available in other healthier nodes, for example, or things like, I have a particular data set here, I want to make sure that data is replicated to another site in case this site fails over because of storms, hurricanes, fires, or whatever, you name it, but the applications are still there, it automatically switches over to the other side and continues to deliver from the point where the data is not lost. So all of those are, typical, I would say, enterprise storage challenges that are solved in the traditional applications, but it's done in, a particular way for, just like in Oracle databases, or VMware has its certain ecosystem, but Kubernetes doesn't have some of these concepts, and that's where, some of these concepts need to be filled in, and we have, so there has been a, I would say, innovation that was needed to fix that complexity to address these enterprise use cases.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. I mean, when I think of these applications and how they're being modernized, I have a maturity model that I usually talk to organizations about, which is starting from heritage applications that may be encapsulated into a VM, and then from there, maybe in what I would call phase three, which is moving into more of like a fat container, and then moving from that fat container to microservices, then a fully elastic environment. So there's 5 stages for these applications, and everything you're talking about aligns to those applications within those stages, because organizations need to be able to bridge the gap between the old and the new, right? And these hurdles that are widespread with these Kubernetes adoptions that we see. Many, as you were talking about, many of these databases are running and they need that persistent storage requirement. So, can you talk a little bit more about the biggest challenges you're seeing with customers and how Dell is helping address these challenges?
So one of the some of the key challenges that we see is like the knowledge needed, right? Knowledge gaps are big. We have folks who are focused more on data governance and health and disaster recovery, and some of the making sure that the data is appropriately secure and things of that nature. And then you have folks who are more app modernized, working in a DevOps fashion, and they are very very familiar with these Kubernetes tool sets and things of that nature. And so now these traditional IT workers, now they are supporting these newer applications, and sometimes they have a hard time, learning these new tools and modernizing it. They would love to have certain tool sets that they are more familiar with, and ease of use, and scalability and things of that nature. So that is one area that I see is one of a big challenge that we need to do. And the second thing, as you mentioned about this multi-cloud aspect, is now we are seeing that so much Kubernetes. We're seeing organizations saying I have like 30, 40, 50 clusters of Kubernetes, and all of them being okay. I want to have a central data states data locality, or I want to have manage it in a centralized fashion when administrative standpoint. So administration becomes very challenging when you are highly distributed like that. So again, so that's another aspect of, how do you manage the scale and complexity, and the fact that Kubernetes is also a very evolving and a rapidly evolving. That's actually the third challenge we see a lot with organizations saying, hey, the Kubernetes is moving at like 3 releases a year. I mean, it's very fast, and traditional IT generally doesn't move that fast. Now they needed tools to say, okay, how can I make sure that I'm always compliant, I'm always like refreshing my infrastructure, I'm always making sure that I can keep up with all the changes happening so rapidly. So these are some of two or three key challenges. And then of course the fourth challenge being, I have my traditional applications, they are very data governed and they have secure and all of that. Now I want to bring all that goodness to Kubernetes, but without impacting the application owners, how they write code and how they consume storage. We don't want them to impact too much complexity on the application side. I want to take some of that complexity away from them and build it on the storage side and administer it seamlessly. So those are the four major challenges that we see that we have looked to address in, some of the product offerings. We recently announced the Apex Navigator for Kubernetes, in May this year, and so that again is looking for, take some of our components that we built in the open source and through CSI and CSM, and then builds that layer of user experience that provides them that scale, reduces the complexity, provides them, and then as a journey, as a continuing evolving journey, we would be looking at lifecycle management, looking at simplicity in terms of how do you enforce some of these data capabilities in from a simpler fashion from for an organization.
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting, kind of the perspective that you're sharing with regards to business continuity, data protection, data recovery, and how these organizations are taking that into consideration. We were talking about earlier. You and I were talking about on our briefing. Our Futurum research showing that 20% of organizations found that it was critical that their applications were portable, right? And we found that 67% indicated that it was very important to their organization. And that's because of similar reasons that you're talking about, which is the ability to, move the application from core to edge to cloud, and having the architecture and the infrastructure to support that. And so as you modernize, as you build these applications, whether it's BCDR or if it's workload burst capacity, or if it's just the ability to move applications across. I mean, I was looking at my recent research the other day, and I was noticing that in the next 3 years, we were seeing that the edge locations are having 500 to 1,000 applications worldwide across these edge locations. That means that those applications need to be able to be moving around and be adjusted. So if they're built on-prem or in a public cloud, they have to move to the edge location. Portability is key. And again, there's a number of reasons to be that way. And then, of course, everything that you mentioned with regards to the CSI driver and container storage modules all align to that perfectly. As we get to the kind of towards the end of the session here, I want to ask about like one of the big challenges that we see with regards to the need to make Kubernetes easy, especially for admins and DevOps teams, that are looking at new technologies. So for these organizations looking to manage multiple Kubernetes clusters, as you know, that's pretty complicated in some environments. What does the role of UI UX design play in the storage management?
So when you look at Kubernetes, I mean, it was defined as a CLI based tool, and and of course it requires, I would say, intricate knowledge of understanding things like YAML, the objects, the kind, resources. And so when you write code, I mean, you are essentially writing a code. It's infrastructure as code. And so you have to be fairly comfortable with coding to actually leverage Kubernetes. And a lot of our administrators that we see, they are not interested in coding as much. They are interested in just performing their work, as in just saying, I want to make sure that, hey, I have a disaster recovery scenario, I need to fail over to another site, or I need to fail back, or I need to set up a backup policy to make sure that all of my application components are getting backed up to provide that, recovery time objective, recovery point objective. How can I restore applications in case something goes wrong? Or how do I enforce to make sure that we have uh, appropriate quotas set? Because the applications, they have like certain quotas, and they also want to make sure that there are resource constraints and things of that nature. So all of that, so they are doing their typical day-to-day administrative functions. And coding would be a huge leap for them to perform that. And especially, I have talked to one large energy company, and in fact the administrator was saying that 10 years ago they had 13 storage administrators, and now they have, like, only one person. And this person, he was responsible for managing all the applications, including the SAPs, the Oracles, the VMware, the Kubernetes, and all the modern applications, everything that requires. And they had very strong storage data governance concepts to make sure that all the applications are, like, backed up, they are replicated, they have DR, they have all of this. So it was very, very hard for this individual to be able to work with 20 different tools. So they wanted centralization to make sure, okay, I'm familiar with certain things, I want to automate, I want to use UX, I want to use ways in which I can scale myself to solve all these challenges, rather than me having to learn like 20 different tools.
Yeah, it makes sense. Actually, what I'm seeing in the research is that simplification of the interface is becoming more and more of a requirement for organizations. In fact, what we're seeing is 67% of respondents in our recent research showed that they were hiring generalists over specialists, and really focusing in on having generalists do the actual day to day, and requiring from the vendors to simplify the solution to make it easier for the generalist to do the work. So I think that what you're talking about with regards to having the increased flexibility to go down to the command line and write lines of code, or having a UI experience, is definitely the interaction between where you're meeting the organization where they need to be. And that's an important factor, because you can go as deep or as high level as you need to go, or as the client may need to go. But
And the idea is to not have just one or the other, it has to have both. And that's where we focus on having both. So we have focused a lot on the CLI aspects until now. I mean, before we had the Apex Navigator, we focused too much on DevOps community. We want to focus on automation, operators, YAMLs, and making them easier from that angle. But then we are now addressing the administrative angle, saying that, so now you have both sides of the equation. So we have an administrative function who's looking at larger, big picture, scale, and larger tasks, and we also have your DevOps personas who are looking at their own things. For example, you may have developers want to doing their own backups and restores and things like that. For various use cases. So those are the two personas, and you have to address both.
yeah, no, absolutely. And so, look, I want to thank you, Nivas, for your time today. And this is really, really exciting, because the insights and perspective that you've shared, it's really just the tip of the iceberg for what organizations need to know. And there's a lot here for them to kind of go through and unpack. Where would you recommend the audience go to get started and to just try this out?
So I would recommend you can go to dell.com/Apex Navigator, and where you can learn more about the Apex Navigator for Kubernetes offer. You can sign up for a free 90-day evaluation, and that way you can get started with this, and there is no commitment required. You can sign off very quickly. It's a SaaS offer. The other aspect I would recommend, you can go developer.dell.com, that has a lot of our developer relations, and also some of our DevOps offers that include everything from CSI, CSM, and also Ansible, Terraform, all the IAC components as well.
Nivas, thank you very much for your time today. This has been a great conversation. I'm sure I enjoyed it. I know we just touched on a little bit here. I'm sure the audience enjoyed just the perspective of trying to figure things out, trying to figure out where they need to go next in their modernization journey, and how they really want to take that VM to Kubernetes kind of approach, and how to manage all their data with it. So a lot happening. So I want to thank you for your time. I also want to thank the audience for attending our session today. There's a lot here to unpack, and I recommend going to the websites that Nivas mentioned. And also, if you want to learn more, feel free to go to thefutureroomgroup.com. Thank you very much.